Mr. Chairman, are you all set?
All right. Mr. Kadim, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the Finance Committee who are here. I do just want to take the opportunity to recognize, and as the board knows, the department heads, because this is really truly a group effort. And this is not just something that happens on a yearly basis. This happens throughout the year. And we are constantly working to make sure that we're within budget and are cognizant of the the taxpayers' monies that are being spent on a given year. And the department heads are truly very fiscally responsible when it comes to this, and constantly working with myself and the CFO to the finance director to make sure that we're presented, number one, a balanced budget, but also at the end of the year remain in the black and having turnbacks to be able to certify free cash. So I want to thank them for everything that they do throughout the year, and I know the board recognizes that in the hard work that they do as well. So the first slide is a slide that, again, I always show, but I think it's something that's truly important because it's something that we've all worked on, and we've seen some significant progress and growth in this area. But it truly is about the long-term growth and sustainability for the town and the planning. And I think that was probably the most evident when the pandemic hit, and we were one of the few communities who were able to kind of make it through the pandemic without having seen significant reductions in the budget or financial implications. And again, that's a testament to the department heads, the Board of Selectmen, the FinCom, and everybody that has put together financial policies. And so with that, the budget process has always remained the same. We take a very conservative budgeting approach. And then when we look at from fiscal year 15 to fiscal year 21, that conservative budget approach has generated $18.3 million, on average $2.6 million a year in free cash. And obviously that money has allowed us to build up stabilization accounts, capital improvement accounts, and fund various projects. Our stabilization account to date is funded at $5.3 million. As the board is aware and the community is aware that we have a financial policy, and the financial policy that was just approved this past April, almost about a year ago now, requires that we have at least a minimum of 15% of the prior year's tax levy. And with the 5.3 million, our tax levy, 7% of the prior year's tax levy. And as we currently stand, we're funded at 15% of the prior year tax levy. So we're almost double the minimum balance that we want to maintain. So that really truly does show a strong financial position for the town. And with that also helps our bond rating when we go out for rating calls, that they will see what our policy is, compare it to our stabilization account, which is essentially seen as a rainy day fund. And to see a balance of $5.3 million really does show strong financial strength when we go out for those calls. As everybody is aware, we have created an OPEB trust fund. The number fluctuates because every year we have the actuarial reports that come through. We've seen this drop from 40 million down to 37 million for unfunded liability. So that allows our actual trust fund to be funded at 9.8%, which is a significantly high percentage compared to other communities. So we continue to put money aside, and as we get the free cash, fund the OPEB trust fund and minimize that unfunded liability. So at some point, the state is going to mandate, and I anticipate that once all the pension funds are fully funded throughout the state will then turn its attention to the OPEB and start forcing communities to have a funding schedule to get fully funded by a certain point. That's not there yet, but I think we'll be in a good position when that does happen to really minimize the exposure for the town from a financial standpoint. And again, as we always do with the budget, we limit the use of free cash and other one-time monies, and we don't utilize those one-time monies to build the operating budget to ensure that we're not creating any type of structural deficits. Our budget assumptions, new growth budgeted at $500,000. We were right on target, as the board is aware, for our projections last year, which was at $500,000, and it came in at $517,000. We're going to the tax levy of the 2.5%, which was voted on by the quad board meeting, at the quad board meeting. Again, very conservative assumption with the local receipts. We're starting to just get back to those pre-pandemic numbers. So we're really finally seeing our local receipts get to those numbers. General unrestricted local aid in Chapter 70 numbers are based on the governor's budget. That's the only numbers that we currently have. At the legislative level, we typically don't see any real numbers or votes on the budget until late June, early July time period. So this is really truly going into town meeting, the numbers that we will see. Adjustments will be made once we see what the final budget number is coming from the legislative branch. Payroll this year is based on 52.2 weeks. And then in terms of collective bargaining agreements, we have the library, police, fire, and dispatch who have either expiring contracts or contracts that have already expired and that we're either in negotiations or will be beginning negotiations on the successor agreement. So those units do not have any salary adjustments built into this budget, which is typical on any given budget year. For the summary of the fiscal year 23 budget, the budget is balanced at $66,579,911. That reflects a 4.95% increase over fiscal year 22. Of that 66.5 million, the general fund accounts for $65,231,167. General government is $17.8 million. Education, which is the largest portion of our budget, is $32.2 million. That number includes Seekonk Public Schools, as well as Tri-County and Bristol Aggie. And then we see fixed costs and debt services. That number is coming in at $15 million. Then we have the Sanitation Enterprise Fund coming in at $1,348,744. That reflects a 6% increase, and I'll get into what that increase reflects later on in the slides. But it's a 6% increase over fiscal year 22. In terms of revenue, our state aid, we're seeing state aid of $8.7 million. Again, that's the governor's numbers. Unrestricted local aid coming in just under $1.5 million. That's only a $10,000 increase. That's the aid that we get on our side. The Chapter 70 money, or the educational monies, revenues coming in at $7.2 million. That's a $431,000 increase over fiscal year 22. Our tax levy, the prior base year was 46 million. We had, with a 2.5% increase, that's going to generate just under $1.2 million. Our estimated new growth, which I talked about in the during the budget assumptions, 500,000. And then we have the debt exclusion of 2.8 million, which is totaling a total tax levy of $50,477,790. Our local receipts, as I mentioned, are finally getting back to pre-pandemic levels. So even though it's coming to 12.98%, it really is pretty much equal to the FY20 local receipts that we've seen. So the big increase here is obviously the meals tax and the hotel tax that we're seeing bounce back. Our motor vehicle excise, $2.9 million. Other revenue sources, $1.8 million. Again, no use of free cash. Our ambulance receipts is accounting for just over $1 million of that 1.8. Overlay surplus, which is the money coming back from the assessor's office for abatements that were not used, is $450,000. And then we've got other revenue sources of $367,378. Just quickly on the overlay surplus, I just want to really point out, even though that's money coming in out of the overlay surplus account, we also put money in from the tax levy to help offset some expected abatements that may be coming in the February 1st time period for tax relief. And this is essentially a wash for us. So we're relieving $450,000 of prior year monies and putting in another $450,000 from the tax levy for this fiscal year to cover any potential abatements in the future. This chart really is just to really kind of paint the picture of where our revenue is coming from. So other sources representing 7%, our local receipts representing 4%, real estate really being our big revenue number is 75%. Chapter 70 state aid is 11%, and then the state aid, unrestricted local aid. Sorry, I hit a wrong button here. State aid, unrestricted local aid is at 2%. And this is just a quick synopsis of the departmental budgets. General government, $3.2 million. That's a 9.77% increase. Legal costs, 0 increase, level funded from last fiscal year. Public safety, $10.6 million. That's a 3.47% increase. Education coming in at 32.3 million. It's a 2.85% increase. DPW, 8.47% increase at 1.8 million. Other environmental services, which is conservation, a budget of 139,000, coming in at close to 40%. Human services, $685,000, coming in at close to a 6% increase. Culture and recreation, which is the library and parks and recs, just under $1.2 million for a 0.32% increase. Debt and interest, $2.9 million at a close to 30% increase. Other fixed costs, $12.1 million, 5.5% increase. And then sanitation enterprise fund, what I mentioned earlier, was a 6% increase. I will just note that when you start looking at the percentages, especially with some of the smaller departments, when you have a $500 increase in expenses or a $1,000 increase in expenses, that really drives the number a little bit higher. So some of these, like for example, other environmental services, a 39% increase. It's due to the fact that it's such a low budget number. And I will say that when we start going through this, at least on the town side and the general government side, our budgets are very, very lean. We continue to make sure and maintain that we have lean budgets in terms of expenses and salaries, and that we're constantly looking at every single line item to see if there's any way to create additional efficiencies or really reduce any unnecessary costs or reallocate costs elsewhere if we're adding new expenses to any budgets.
Mr. Kadim?
Yep.
In looking at that prior slide, does the education line item there include costs for, say, Tri-County, Bristol Aggie, transportation?
It does. Yeah, it includes all of that. So that captures all, and I'll break those educational numbers down in the later slides. But that number in itself is not just the Seekonk Public Schools. It's Tri-County, Bristol Aggie, and all that transportation costs for the two schools.
Now, how about for our own schools?
Yeah, so their number, for our schools, we give them an appropriation. They have a budget, so that they'll have their transportation numbers in there as well. We don't get a separate line item for transportation, unlike Tri-County and Bristol Aggie, where they give us transportation numbers.
Thank you.
So because the regional schools give us an assessment, we actually appropriate funding for the Seekonk Public Schools. This is just a chart to really kind of give you a visual on where our budgets are. So education, 50% is really the big piece of our budget. 4% coming from debt service, 19% for employee benefits and fixed costs. General government, 7%. Public safety coming in at 16%, and then DPW at 3%, and human services at 1%.
Mr. Kadim,
Yes.
that employee benefits, that does include the teachers in there too, right? It's the town and the schools, correct?
Correct.
So that's not included in that education line item.
Correct. Yep. So the employee benefits for pension and healthcare include the pension costs and healthcare costs for both the school and the town. So just going to run through each department and try to, and I know some folks think this is good information. Some folks think that's too much information. Really, truly, what I'm really trying to capture here is trying to give everybody the most accurate picture. I don't capture all the increases, but I capture what I feel are the most important increases. So if you do not go through the budget and you review these slides, you will have an understanding of where the increases are coming from and where the decreases are coming from. So I tried my best. I know it's probably 28 or 25 slides from this point on, but I just ask folks to please bear with me. So in the Selectman office, the budget is $37,400. This reflects an 18% increase over fiscal year 22. And really the only increase here against, and this is what we're talking about being small budgets, the 18% is really just an increase of $5,000 to the line item of other initiatives. And this is really to cover the additional costs for TV9. As the board is aware, we're having and asking other boards and committees to really have TV9 publicize their meetings. So with that comes a cost, and that cost is always taken out of the Selectman's office. And then some other initiatives for residents. The most recent one is the tree lighting. We want to continue to expand that. We felt it was a very well attended, and we got a lot of great feedback for that. So to help to continue to grow that, we put an additional $5,000 in to cover all these additional costs. The town administrator's office, $448,451. And I just want to be transparent here. I know folks tend to always go to the town administrator's office. Obviously, it's one of those things that I personally expect and anticipate on a year-to-year basis. But we have a 4.5% increase over fiscal year 22. We don't necessarily typically see that, but we've got an office of 4 individuals, so 4 full-time employees. And we've got 3 of those employees that have contracts that are close to each other and they expire. So we will see every third year a more higher increase as those collective bargaining, those individual contracts are ratified. What I will say, there's a list of things that come in here, and I know folks are looking at the 448,000 and comparing it to 4 individuals, but the amount of work and task that goes into the town administrator's office is very, very significant. I've got a list if the board wants to hear the list later on after the presentation. I know you folks understand what the office has to deal with, but for the general public to truly understand, our office is a very hands-on office, and we handle a myriad of issues and projects and policies and licenses and dealing with constituent complaints. And we're very hands-on, and I think which allows us to be as efficient and provide a cost-saving measure across the town, even when we're dealing with other departments. So based on that, the salary adjustment for the 4 full-time equivalents, we have the TA and the assistant TA with COLA adjustments of 2%, and the 2% is pretty consistent with what the increases you'll be seeing throughout these slides for collective bargaining agreements and individual contracts. With the exception of those that might have had a salary adjustments made to their positions. The executive administrative assistant had a mid-year contract renewal in FY22, and then we're seeing a 2% adjustment for FY23. The administrative assistant's new contract for FY23 included a wage adjustment, so the increase there is a 4.56%, and the wage adjustment really just got that individual close to a similar pay and salary for a comparable position of administrative assistant. In fact, we just had one which was hired on the police side, so that really kind of brought things in line there. Elections, $32,094. Again, significant increase here in terms of percentage, 130.45% increase over 22. This increase really is only an $8,000 increase, but this is to cover 3 elections. So we'll have 1 town election and then 2 state elections, or assuming that there are 2 state elections if there's a primary. The costs include 4 election workers, 3 police officers, cost of ballots, printing the ballots, and other related voting expenses there. The registrar's budget is $11,752. This reflects a 7.7% increase. We had $800 increase for census printing, mailing, and annual street listing and binding of those lists. The Director of Finance, this budget is $244,124. This reflects a 47% increase over FY22. I will say that this number or this budget is slightly inflated. So next fiscal year 24, we'll see some reduction in this, and that's simply due to the fact that we've got our finance director retiring, and we have a retirement buyout of $55,000 for that line. So that's driving that portion of that. This department has 2 FTEs. The finance director salary was adjusted as we went out for recruitment to $110,000 for that position. 95% of the salary is covered in the general fund, and then 5% is charged directly to the sanitation enterprise fund, as opposed to being part of the indirect cost. We charge the 5% of the salary directly there. And I mentioned the one-time expense increase due to the retirement. The assessor's office, $313,335. This reflects a 5.25% increase. That office has four FTEs, so they are now fully staffed. We had some vacancies there that we were trying to deal with and fill. So we're fully staffed. We had contractual adjustments for the clerical unit coming in at 2.25%. And so we also had some step increases and longevities increases there for some of the clerical unit employees. Contractual adjustments for the supervisors units. We have 2 individuals in that unit, 2% cost of living adjustment, step increases, and longevity. We had a $1,200 increase for contractual clothing allowance line item, $1,500 increase for conferences and seminars. And this increase really is to get the assessor and the assistant assessor some additional training that hasn't been provided to them in years past. So a little bit more professional development as we have 2 new employees in those positions. And then we also reduced the personal property services line item down by $4,000. So this will allow RRC to come in and do our personal property valuations and assist with those valuations with the assessor's office. Treasurer's office, $203,438. This reflects a 3% increase. Contractual increases, again, clerical unit 2.25%, supervisor's unit 2%. Treasurer's salary here, 50% charged to the collector's budget. So when we get to that slide, 50% of her salary will be in that budget as well. Our tax title, we were actually reduced this by $10,000, so that reflects a 20% decrease. And this really goes kudos to Chris DeFonts and her team and staff over in the Treasurer's office for being very aggressive with tax title collection. As I mentioned before, we went out for an auction on the tax title property that we have acquired. They continue to do a phenomenal job, and we've been since I've been here in 2014, had increased the budget about $10,000 each year to really try to catch up, and we've caught up, and they've done a phenomenal job on that. Town clerk's office is $148,580. This reflects a 4.5% increase over fiscal year 22. We have a contractual adjustment for the supervisor unit, which is 1 individual, 2% adjustment there. And she also has a longevity. The town clerk has put in a request to have a salary adjustment for her position of $6,365. So we built that into the budget, and that's part of that 4.5% increase. This will require, as it always does for the town clerk, approval at town meeting, as she's an elected official. So she will have a separate warrant article for her salary there, but we have built that into the operating budget. The Management Information System, or MIS, as it is commonly referred to, is $339,506. We see a 2.8% increase here. We had a reduction in services for software of $7,400, but we saw increases of $8,800 to services tech, which will cover our website, Energov, which is our online permitting, ExecuTime, which is our online time card system. Services software increased by $7,800 as well. Software, and this is really truly the munis costs that we see year over year. They have pretty significant, anywhere from 5 to 8% increases year over year on the munis software, which is our financial system. The Zoning Board of Appeals, their budget is $53,321, 4% increase. Really just contractual adjustments in that department. Planning Board, $150,781, 37% increase here. So we've got the typical contractual increases that I've been mentioning. What we're also seeing here is $24,000 increase in the roll-up effect for the FY22 mid-year hire of the part-time employee going to the full-time clerical position. So just to remind the board, we had a full-time clerical position that was split between conservation and planning. We added the full-time position, so the person who was holding that is going to go full-time into conservation, and we just posted and filled the position for a full-time clerical person in planning board. So that's what we're seeing here. We have a $13,000 increase for planning board stipends, which was approved at last town meeting. That was not built into last year's budget. So we see a little bit of an increase here as well for a catch up. And then we've got a $1,500 increase for third-party consultant plan reviews. The building operation, $765,607. That's a 9% increase. And this is for building maintenance and repair lines that needed to be adjusted. We have adjustments that were made to electric and gas lines for all municipal buildings. There's somewhat of a concerning trend, and we're not quite sure what's going on. So I just want to bring it to the board's attention. We had a very large increase in the public safety electric building account to the tune of $20,000. And when you go back to FY21, we had increased it by $5,000 to make the adjustment. So over a 2-year period, we're seeing a $25,000 increase. And we've sat down to try to see if it really truly is just pricing that's coming in, but it's not really, we weren't really able to capture whether that was the only reason for it or if there were any changes. The heat was down. We had some temporary heating in there, but to the cost that we're seeing, or the increase in the expenses that we're anticipating of $20,000 is pretty significant, which is all based on actuals. So we're working with Mr. Cabral, Mr. Alexander to do an audit of the electric in the public safety building to see if this truly is the increase based on rates going up and usage. But we're not seeing anything significant that would suggest that there should be that type of increase in terms of change to the use of that building. So we'll keep the board aware, but for budgeting purposes, we did increase that account by $20,000. Then we also added $10,000 for added playground maintenance and upkeep to the playgrounds outside of Town Hall. Town Hall expense, that budget is $152,090. This reflects a 20% increase. We had a $30,000 increase for professional development. And this was something we're really trying to focus in on and get more professional development for all our department heads and employees. And we've slowly increased this line, but as we have more of a demand for, especially with new employees coming on, to really kind of get them the development training that they need. This includes mandatory trainings and recertifications that current employees hold. But some of the trainings that we're looking at, sending folks to get certified as procurement officers, even if they don't get certification, they've taken the class so that they understand it. Currently, we have our superintendent, assistant superintendent of DPW going through that process. We've had Chris and Kristen in my office going through the process as we handle all the procurement in there as well. The assistant TA went through that. Then we also have leadership training scheduled, some public records, open meeting laws, which cover not only employees, but board members and boards that and committees that we've invited to, safety training and other job specific trainings. And this really is to go above and beyond some of the free trainings that our town council offers. So KP Law does offer and provide some free trainings for us on a yearly basis. We typically tend to use that throughout the year and do that at department head meetings. Shifting gears from general government over to public safety, we're going to start with the police department here. Their budget is $4,937,770. This reflects a 4% increase over FY22. In terms of salaries, we have 40 full-time equivalents, 1 chief, 1 deputy, 1 captain, 3 lieutenants, 7 sergeants, and 27 officers. Just as a reminder, again, the police union their contract is expiring, so there's no cost of living adjustments for their salaries. They're just step increases that have been captured. Contractual adjustments for the chief, deputy chief, and technical administrative assistant and executive administrative assistant have been included. The chief and deputy chief have individual contracts. The technical administrative assistant is in the dispatch unit, and then the executive administrative assistant used to be in a union, is now an individual employment contract. We have a $5,000 increase for detective overtime, and this $5,000 increase really is dedicated to the detectives being able to conduct the evidence in drug room audits and destruction. So this is really just to keep their drug room and evidence room in compliance and get rid of any old drugs or evidence that is no longer needed. So they'll be needing that for overtime to work with the court systems to do the destruction of those files. For vacation, we saw a vacation increase, and that was for vacation replacement due to adding a vacation day per the collective bargaining agreement. We had a $20,000 increase for a community engagement line for the police department, and that was for the National Light Out and Citizens Academy. So we want to continue those two programs and fund them accordingly. We had a $5,000 increase in PD training salaries, and this covers training for special officers, and the training there is 480 hours for 6 officers, and there's also new requirements that our specials have to have full academy. So there's also some additional costs associated with getting them through what they call a bridge academy, and plus any in-house training of the specials that would be required as part of their service as special officers. We have a $3,000 increase for services for pre-employment, and that's to cover 3 academy recruits that we have. $6,500 increase in software for increased cost to licensing agreements. And then we have a $15,000 increase for motor fuel. And that's all based on trend analysis on actuals. Moving over to public safety communications, the budget is $1,030,515. This reflects a 10% increase over 22. It's a 2% contractual increase for the director of communications, and then contractual increase of $1 to the lead dispatcher and dispatch emergency specialists. There is also a roll-up effect on a mid-year hire for the dispatch emergency specialist, which we just filled. We have union step increases, and here we have no COLA adjustments due to the expiring 2-year contracts for dispatch. We've got a $5,000 increase in overtime due to contractual salary rate increases, $1,000 increase in shift differential, and that was contractual as well. That went from $1.50 to $1.75. $12,000 increase in radio maintenance line to cover Cybercom's service agreement. $8,000 increase in the phone line to cover increased costs for service agreements, Comcast related and other phone data increases there. We have a $5,000 increase in dispatch equipment replacement. And just as a talking point here, the 911 grant covers 16 hours per person of state approved training as well as APCO membership. So while we budget 100% of these costs, we do get reimbursements. So I'm assuming that we get these 911 grants, the public safety communication always has turnbacks, which go to free cash because of that grant that covers some of the budgeted expenses. Fire department, $3,970,318. It's a 2% increase. The staffing levels here is a 40 FTE. 1 chief, 1 deputy, 2 captains, 8 lieutenants, 28 firefighters. Contractual adjustments for the chief and senior secretary as the individual contract and union contracts there. No COLA adjustments for the fire union. Their contract is expiring, so we're starting to begin the discussions for a successor agreement. And I'm sorry. The slide was actually supposed to be deleted. That 2-year collective bargaining expiring in FY23 was really for dispatch, not for fire. $40,000 increase in OT to cover staffing shortages. We have 6 vacancies, as the board is aware. We had a $500 increase for fire inspection stipends to cover the second captain. And then $5,200 increase in services to vehicle. That was due to an anticipated 8% increase in services related to the cost associated with vehicle repairs. We had a $3,500 increase to services contracts to cover increased costs for license agreements. And this covers things such as our Prodigy, Stryker, LabTech, which is our scheduling system, and Zoll Medical and other service contracts. Staying on public safety, we've got the forestry expense. That's $65,000, reflects a 30% increase. And this is just going to provide $15,000 more for additional tree removal. Dave Cabral has done a phenomenal job working with this budget, trying to remove hazardous trees. He continues to do that. His list continues to grow with trees that are dead and creating hazardous over the public ways. So we've increased that by $15,000. The building inspector's budget is $261,066. This reflects a 5% increase over 22. We've got contractual agreements for a clerical unit individual of 2.25%, and then 2 contractual adjustments for the supervisor's unit at 2%, which include step increases. We also have a CBA requirement of $1,200 for clothing allowance. The gas inspector budget is $10,000. That was an increase of 16%. This increase is based on trends for the gas inspections and plan reviews, which is a good thing. So we do $35 per inspection. So that really is covering the cost associated with the number of permits that we're seeing in new building projects that are coming forward. Animal control. Their budget is $249,699. This reflects a 7% decrease, and this is due to, we have Sharon Hall, who the board has just approved at their prior meeting, the retirement. She'll be retiring at the end of this week. So we'll be moving that position from an animal control officer to an assistant animal control officer. So that would leave us staffing of 4.5. So 1 animal control officer, 2 assistant animal control officers, 1 full-time kennel worker, and then 1 part-time kennel worker. Contractual adjustments were made at 2% and step increases for this unit. And then animal control officer retirement, which I just spoke about. That change going from the ACO to an assistant ACO will save us $22,000 in the budget. Department of Public Works, the budget is $1,842,669. This reflects an 8% increase. Staffing levels here are 1 superintendent, 1 assistant superintendent, 2 clerical, 4 foremen, 5 operators, 1 mechanic, 9 drivers, laborers, and then 1 facilities maintenance. The staffing level reflects the only increase that we're actually looking for throughout this budget. So we're asking to add 1 additional new hire for DPW. And it's really over a 3-year period. And talking with Mr. Cabral and Mr. Olobri about his operations and the needs that are coming up with the various properties that we've been acquiring and the demands on his department, looking over a 3-year period, it would seem that we would need to be in a good position to really kind of manage all of our facilities and all the properties that we've recently acquired for new positions. And so what we're looking to do over the 3-year period is add 1 new driver or laborer to the FY23 budget, and then 1 new driver or laborer in 24, and then add 2 new positions in FY25. Outside of that, it's just contractual adjustments for the superintendent and the assistant superintendent at 2%, and then contractual adjustments for the DPW unit at 1.7%, which includes COLA adjustments and step increases and longevity as well. Continuing on with Public Works, we've got a $10,000 increase in overtime to cover maintenance of the newly acquired land. The big piece there is the Madeira's property once we get the Madeira's property, and then also the trails that we've been trying to maintain throughout town. We've got a $3,000 increase to exam license line item, and this is to cover the pesticide license for the ball fields and conservation areas, so that DPW will be able to treat those areas in-house. We had a $3,000 increase for uniform line item to cover the new FTE. We had a $5,000 increase to the motor fuel line, $10,000 increase to vehicle supply line item, $10,000 increase to the equipment supply line item, and then we had a $10,000 increase to services consultant line item, and this is for engineering services that we'll be able to utilize throughout the year with DPW. Moving on to environmental highlights or conservation, $139,975. This reflects a 39% increase over FY22. We've got contractual adjustments of 2.25% for clerical, 2% again for supervisors, $16,000 roll-up effect for FY22 mid-year hire here. But truly it's a little bit more because that $16,000 was actually captured through the revolving account for conservation. We have 60% of the salaries being charged to the general fund, and then 40%, as the board knows, getting charged to the conservation revolving account. We have a $7,500 increase to consulting line item, which will allow for additional consulting on several new projects and newly acquired property. The biggest portion really going to the Madeira's property. $4,500 increase to supplies, special events, and this is really to cover the storybook trails and ribbon cuttings for the work that will be done on Burrs Pond and Madeira's property. I just want to highlight, I think Jen has done a phenomenal job, especially with some of our trails in the storybook, adding the storybook trails to the town. So she's looking to continue and expand that. So I think the community really appreciates that and enjoys the work and effort that's been put in by DPW and her staff and Jen as well. Board of Health, $213,195. I will say, when Brian's on the line, I think he needs a budget that's triple this after all the work that they have done over the last 2 years with this pandemic. I just want to acknowledge that they have done a phenomenal job. Brian has stepped into the role, and we truly appreciate everything he's done. He's handled everything with a smile and has never lost his cool or sanity. So I do want to recognize him for that while he's on the call, and his staff as well. But this budget increased by 4%, and again, solely due to the contractual increases that I've been mentioning before. $1,200 increase in uniform allowance that's required by the collective bargaining agreement, and then $900 increase to cover costs for additional conferences and seminars for himself and his assistant. Moving over to human services. Human services budget is $249,543. This reflects a 12% increase over FY22. Again, the contractual increases, as you can see. $15,000 increase for the outreach coordinator. And this is hopefully trying to get it from, well, it's been budgeted, but if approved, getting it from a part-time to a full-time position, as the demands have increased for the work that is being done and all the outreach that Brittany Farrier is doing with the human services and the senior center over there. She also did a phenomenal job during the pandemic, working with the seniors and those folks who are in need of services, whether it be the food pantry, and she's gone above and beyond and donated her time even outside of the scope of the office hours, the 8:30 to 4:30 time period. So that would really give her an opportunity to help do a little bit more, going from part-time to full-time. We have an $8,000 increase due to the moving of community liaison salary from the state formula grant to the general fund. So the state formula grant we were charging off the community liaison individual. And as we try to expand the services at the programs at the senior center, it makes more sense for us to take the $8,000, shift the $8,000 over to the general fund and free that up for additional programs. And that would allow us to really kind of minimize the cost associated with these programs for the seniors and those other folks that are actively participating in the programs that are coming forward. Veteran services, $206,367. This reflects a 2% increase over 22. It's a cost of living adjustment of 2%, and then $2,500 increase for the veteran services other line, which is to cover the cost for increased flags. Everything else has been level funded. And then library services, this budget is $1,062,401. This reflects a 0% increase over 22 as we're still in negotiations. There's no salary adjustments here for that staff at the library. This does meet the municipal appropriation requirement and the materials state requirement of 16%. And just as a reminder, the MAR, we need to meet the MAR to keep our certifications and be eligible for funding that comes in and grants for this coming through the state. And essentially, if anybody's interested, the formula for the calculation for figuring out what the MAR is, it's just taking an average over the last 3 years in terms of what's been appropriated to the library, and then multiplying that by 2.5%. So they want to see a 2.5% increase on that. Shifting gears over to fixed costs, debt and interest coming in at $2,927,883. That reflects a 29% increase. And this is due to the bonding for the Aiken expansions, the Senior Center Phase 2 and the South End Fire Station. Other fixed costs, $12,133,558. That's a 6% increase over 22. The pension being a big piece of that is $3,471,949. That was an increase of $106,000. We have $699,000 set aside for liability insurance. That covers our workers' comp, unemployment, medical claims, et cetera. We have $7.3 million for health insurance. That's a 6% increase. And we've been lucky over the last 2 years. If nothing's been a blessing through this pandemic, I think this one line item we've really kind of stabilized this because obviously a lot of the costs that we typically incur because of elective surgeries were minimized over the last 2 years because those services weren't rendered. But now we're starting to see the health insurance numbers increase again. So we are seeing that 6% increase. And then we had $612,000 for other fixed costs, which are payroll taxes, things of that nature. Okay, we're going to go into the educational highlights, and this is where we kind of start wrapping up the presentation here. But the Seekonk schools, and this is solely for the Seekonk schools, the appropriation here is $30,859,506. That was sent over to the superintendent. He does have that number. This reflects a 2.6% increase. As I mentioned earlier in the slides, Chapter 70 has increased by $431,251. So when you look at Chapter 70 and the additional funding that comes in, 77% of the funding is coming from the town. The foundation enrollment is at 2,087. So that gets us back to the levels prior to the pandemic where some students were doing homeschooling. Net school spending for this fiscal year is $24,525,300. The town's minimum contribution requirement is $17,348,780. So the school department is being funded $6,334,206 above net school spending. This is a chart. This is the same chart that was presented last year. Unfortunately, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has not updated, but I do think it's a chart that's very telling. It tracks Chapter 70 and spending for education since ed reform back in 1993. And as you can see all the way to the right, you'll see FY21. We were $6.9 million above net school spending compared to what the minimum, and I just want to stress that it's the minimum required by the state to provide funding for education. Tri-County, 1,270,392. This reflects the FY22 assessment. We still haven't received an assessment from Tri-County. The foundation enrollment is 83%, and CCONC represents just under 10% of their enrollment. Bristol Aggie, this is a 285% increase over FY22. So their budget is, or the assessment for Bristol Aggie is $158,339,000. Last year, or this current year, FY22, we just had an assessment for the cost of 18 students to go to Bristol Aggie. Bristol Aggie was kind enough to send us a new assessment based on the new school that was built without really telling us mid-year in other communities. And I think a lot of communities were upset by it. But we saw a $108,000 increase due to the debt assessment. So that's really what's driving that significant increase. So last year's budget was at $58,000 roughly, or $50,000. So now we've got that additional debt assessment, which is driving this $108,000 increase. So that wraps up the general fund. Now going into the enterprise funds, sanitation budget, $1,406,705. That reflects a 6% increase over FY22. The landfill budget is $285,211. Big expenses there, really just contractual salary adjustment of $3,000. Our collection, disposal, recycling budget, $1,063,533. We're on year 9 of a 10-year contract. The collection contract has increased by 17,924. So it's just a 2.5% increase year over year for that collection contract costs. Our tipping fees increase $1 each year per ton. So we're going from $79 to $80 a ton. And then the big increase here is $55,000 increase in disposal costs, and that's solely due to the tonnage change. And we had the tonnage change actually occurred last fiscal year, or this fiscal year 22, and we're really capturing it now in FY23. So that's driving a $55,000 increase. And then the indirect costs, these are charges that we come up with and charge the enterprise fund for services that we're eligible to charge for, like the collector's office, a portion of my salary to various work and things of that nature. So this will come in as revenue into the general fund. So we'll be seeing a transfer out of the sanitation. So it gets charged as an expense, comes into the general fund as a revenue of $57,960. And then with that wraps up the presentation. So I'll open it up to any questions.
All right, Mr. Deem, thank you very much. Very thorough, as always. Nice job.
Thank you.
I'm going to open this up to board members, and we have from FinCom, we have Mr. Salisbury, Mr. Yan, and I know in the attendees, I see Mr. Duquette. If you have a question, just unmute your phone and you can ask a question. But I'll open it up right now to any board members. And mind you, I have a different screen here, so I'm having difficulty.
I have a question for you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Petronio.
All right, so for you, Mr. Chairman, Sean, the sanitation, we're 9 of 10. Is that 22 is 9 of 10, and then 23
is 9 of 10.
Okay, so in 24, we're going to start the renegotiation for the tipping fees and stuff like that. So that next year budget was what we're going to be concerned about, right?
That's correct. And typically, I mean, when you start looking at 10-year contracts for sanitation, it really, it gives you some consistency over and controlling costs. Typically the disposal companies will make money. I will tell you that we have significantly benefited through this contract because of the China sword, with all the significant increases in disposal costs, especially with recycling. So this 10-year contract really truly save the town a lot of money in terms of that. There's ABC tried to get out of their recycling contract, change the pricing associated with it. We've met with them several times and held our ground, saying that we weren't going to change it and take on any additional costs. So it was a little bit of a battle there for a while, but this truly was a benefit to the community. So that being said, in 2 years we'll be looking to go out to get another contract, and I think at that point we'll see some significant increases. Hopefully we'll be able to mitigate some of the costs there with some competitive bids that would be coming in. I will say that we don't have to go out to bid. This is exempt from 30B, but typically you would hold it and have a competitive process so that we can get competitive rates. So that would be my suggestion to the board.
Okay, fair enough. So that's not a question for this year. That'll be a question for next year.
Correct.
Excellent.
Anything else, Mr. Petronio?
None at this time. I'll yield the floor.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go down my list here. Mr. Zora, any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple actually. For the high electric at the public safety, I brought up a few years ago when I first got on about the solar panels for the carports, which they did all in Rehoboth at the school departments. Should we be looking into that again?
Yeah, that was part of the, if we recall, I think it was a couple of meetings back, we had talked about with Mr. Beauchamp and the Energy Committee about trying to look at the solar panels at the landfill, the old landfill on 114A. Part of that is going to include trying to see whether or not we do carports. Back in, I want to say it was 2015, 2008, 16 maybe, myself, Mr. Cabral, we had Amoresco come in to look at various ways to try to kind of reduce our energy footprint. And one of those discussions were potentially having a carport behind public safety. So we can revisit it. At the time, it didn't make sense based on payback periods and some of the things, how the programs are working there from a financial standpoint. But we will be revisiting it when we start looking at that landfill.
I believe at the time I brought it up years ago, Dayton Rehoboth had theirs paid for by some company. And then when we looked into it, I believe that initiative was already over. So I believe that's why we didn't pursue it as much as we liked. Also, for DPW, we put 4 foremen. We're up in the more up to from 2 to 4 for position ranks.
Moving out. No, there's no, it should, we currently have, it should probably said 3. I'm sorry. It should have been 3. So we're looking to have one of them be facilities. So we need a facilities foreman. So the way we budgeted it was we had an operator in there originally. So when we were talking, we weren't sure if we wanted an operator or a truck driver laborer, but looking to promote somebody internally and then have somebody come in and a truck driver laborer. So that's what's budgeted.
Okay. And then just to touch base on the trash, and years ago, Seekonk used to do their own in-house recycling. It was cheaper back then. And there's now the time where, call it a year, 2 years out, to start looking into start preparing our things to go out to bid, or looking at used trash trucks to do it all in-house, or is it too premature right now?
I guess I would say it's a little early now, but I would just throw my 2 cents out there. I don't know that we want to take it in-house. Communities are starting to move in a different direction. I don't know if trash is the business we want to be in. But I think there's ways to be able to be competitive and try to reduce some costs with various vendors. And some of it may be not to have the same vendor that comes in and takes trash. You can do a transfer station, things of that nature. So I think there's some discussions that we'll need to have, but I think it's a little early to really kind of discuss that now.
All right. Then the last thing I noticed, the town clerk's looking for a $6,000 increase on her pay on top of the 2% that she gets with the collective bargain. Is that?
Yep. No, she doesn't get collective bargaining. So she
just gets a typical raise that mirrors what they get, right?
Correct. She has one staff member who's in the union, and then her increase is solely voted on at town meeting. So she did provide comps from other communities, and this position is a little tough because you run the gamut from other communities as to those that are elected positions versus those that are appointed. Then you've got full-time versus part-time, and then you've got town clerks who, because communities are so small that they actually serve as a town clerk for 2 communities. So it becomes a little bit challenging to kind of get where they are from a salary standpoint. But when we start looking at the salary adjustment based on comparables, I think it's a reasonable increase, whether or not town meeting supports that. She did provide me with, and I can share it with the board, a list of additional tasks that she has acquired throughout the years that really kind of justify her reasoning behind the $6,300 increase.
Okay, we don't even have department heads making that much money. Just so you know, I'm sure you're well aware. So I don't know what the increase is coming from. I get comparables, this and that, but seems like an awful lot of money.
I'll forward to the board what I was presented, so that you have it.
All right, and I'm all set for right this second.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Zora. Mr. Andre, do you have anything? You're on mute. Still on mute.
I said, no, I interjected with questions when I had them, and a lot of the questions that I had were either already answered or included in the presentation that was given, so I'm good.
All right, thank you. Next on my line here, Mr. Salisbury, FinCom.
I do not have, actually, that's a lie. I do have one question for you, Mr. Kadim, and thank you for the presentation. I appreciate the thoroughness of it and how in-depth you get with everything.
Thank you.
As far as debt and interest go, do we have anything that's retiring soon? And do we have anything new that's coming online soon?
Yeah, so we have the, and I can forward that over to the FinCom. We do have the retiring debt, so you can see exactly what's coming off. So we do have debt that's retiring, and then we're adding to the list that I had mentioned was the Aiken School Senior Center Phase 2 and Fire Station. Thank you. But I can send you the list of the retiring debt that will show you everything that's ritiring and what we have on there.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That was the only question I had.
Thank you, Mr. Salisbury. Mr. Yan?
Just going back to the line item for the $10,000 for playground maintenance, can we get some background information on that?
Yeah, so we have folks come in just to make sure that they everything's tightened up. So it's just a service agreement to make sure that the bolts are screwed. And then the big piece is really just staining the wood that's there to make sure that it's not chipping. That's where those two items account for the 10,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Yan. Mr. Duquette?
No further questions, Mr. Chairman. I had those answered during the presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right. I had to skip over Mr. Healy. He had to step away for just a brief moment, but that being said, are there any other questions from others? I think Mr. Zora?
All right, yeah, I did have one more question. Sean, as far as the line item under the police goes for vehicles, given the current situation with the vehicles in general, we put stuff on order for DPW, all types of departments. We just received a vehicle from fire that was allocated over a year ago. Does it make sense to use some of that money as we just got a couple meetings ago for the from the tax reserves to go ahead and order more vehicles so we're ahead of the game? Because we just got, the last email you sent out was we just received 4 vehicles, or maybe it was on the monthly report, but they were ordered a year and a half ago, I believe 2 years ago, because just because of the whole supply chain issue. So does it make sense to go ahead and place a double order It's not like we're gonna get 6 vehicles in one shot because, it could be, a year and a half out at this point.
Yeah, let me just let me circle back with the chief and the deputy chief on that to see where they stand with it. But I will say that the supply chain is still the same. Vehicle orders are still a full year out. But I will, knowing that, I'll have a conversation with them and get back to you on that.
All right. So I know you said they had something on hand, an administrative vehicle on the lot, but
Yeah, that's even a year out as well, close to a year.
so I mean, I don't want to, if we can
Yeah.
forward the money to put an order in, so we're not multiple years out. I mean, we ordered DPW trucks, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and we still haven't received them.
Mhm.
Just because of the whole chip shortage and everything like that. So I don't want to be in a spot where our vehicles are really going bad because we can't keep up because of the supply chain shortage. So we're actually putting extra use on the current fleet instead of, rotating it in. That's just a concern I have.
Yeah, I'll circle back with that.
Mr. Petronio.
I remembered my other two. I couldn't at the time. I have two questions. One's really quick. The RFP process that we discussed at one of the previous meetings with the Energy Commission on the solar panel project, is that, I believe that we agreed that was in town administrators. Are you working on that, Sean?
Yeah, I'm gonna be working on that. So we just wrapped up we just finished the RFP for the fire station for architectural services, so we can get that out.
Okay, all right. I'm just wanted to see where we were in the status of that. I know we just discussed it, so, and you need some time and space to get on that because you have a lot of ankle biters. My second question is in the nature of our cannabis agreement. The grow, we have a retail that's up and running, and all that's starting to happen. How are the metrics going to be representative for that? Those fees?
Yeah, so we haven't seen any of the revenues come in as of yet. So I'm not sure how well they're doing in terms of what we'll be receiving. But overall, as the revenue comes in, it will just flow in through the general fund. So it'll be a local receipts associated with that.
Okay.
And then from there, we're really setting that aside, and the intent from the board, at least the direction they had given me early on, was to set that money into the building and infrastructure improvement stabilization account. So we'll identify that and make sure that as part of free cash that's going into that account. So I'm hoping by next quarter we'll see our first report from the state in terms of the revenue that we'll be receiving from that one retail shop operation that's open.
Excellent. And I know it's early, but I figured I'd ask the question now so that, sure it's on some people's minds as to how that's going to inject itself into a line item eventually on this and show a positive increase to our operating as opposed to
it's a good discussion on that because our local receipts do not include any marijuana revenue.
Okay.
We will have marijuana revenue coming in through the general fund. So again, it'll come in as a surplus, be generated and certified as free cash by the Department of Revenue. And at that point, make the appropriation.
Excellent. All right. Those were my two questions. Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Petronio. Mr. Kadim, just to build on that real quick, from an expectation standpoint, how does the process work? Does Solar have to report back to the state on a quarterly basis, and then the state reports it back to us, and then we get the revenue later? So what's the lag period, I guess, from what we're talking about?
I'm not sure where the lag is in terms of the state coming back, but it's real time because the system, the state has access to their system.
Yeah.
So they see all the sales, so they get it on obviously a daily basis. So I'm not sure how the lag time is in terms of reporting it on a monthly or quarterly basis. I just
Does Solar pay us directly, or does the state pay us?
It comes from the state.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, good. That was all. I did have a question for DPW. And it had to do with the resurfacing expense. So in looking through the budget previously, Yeah, I know we had to increase the last couple of years. In part that we've had some roll up of projects and that we also have made the decision to, particularly last year, to abandon the chip seal process. But the amount has now remained the same at 119, where previously it was at 84. Are we getting the same road coverage, same number of road coverage? And I see Mr. Gabral's on, if maybe it's a question for him, but just curious in terms of what we're getting with the new change in the number.
Yes, so that's just additional work, but that's not the primary source or funding source for the road work. So our Chapter 90 is allocated to us, so we get the Chapter 90 monies coming in from the state. So I haven't seen our allocation as of yet from the state. So this really is just as additional funding to help offset some additional projects there.
Okay. And then can you just speak a little bit more, and also this is another DPW, but just really the plan over the next 3 years with the substantial personnel. I say substantial, it's overstated, but there is a personnel increase going on with DPW over the course of the next, call it 3 years. What's really kind of driving that?
So I think a lot of it is right now is staffing levels are just not optimal for what we have currently. So I think it really is playing a little bit of a catch up in terms of the staffing that we needed. And Mr. Cabral can jump on and speak a little bit more to it. But when we were having conversation, it really is, there's a high demand for the recreational fields that we have, additional catch basins and road work that they actually do and perform. So then there's also the building projects, the buildings that are coming on. We've got new buildings and the demand for building facilities. There are requests coming from the police department, animal control. So there are a number of different projects, and I really never do TPW enough justice in terms of trying to identify the amount of work. So that's why I want Dave to really kind of jump on here and have some conversations with it. But and then street sweeping programs, things of that nature. So when we start talking about the trails, we've got the Burrs Pond that we're going to be looking to get fixed. We currently just had a kickoff meeting with regards to additional some state grants that would help us assess the dam project over there. We're required every 2 years to provide a dam report, and that Burrs Pond Dam is significantly in need of repair. So we're currently doing that. So DPW will be doing some of that work and maintenance, but as part of that, opening up some trails over in that area as well. So as we start to do the trails with Gamino Pond, we've got the town hall trails, we've got the trails at Burrs Pond. Every year it requires some additional maintenance that would require them to go in and maintain that. So it's more and more added demand on DPW. So what he was looking to do was get an additional 2 people, and he had it task specific. Really, they obviously are not going to be just delegated specifically to these tasks, because obviously they're interchangeable. They move around to different projects, but 2 people focused on just getting additional bodies for catch basin work. It was 1 additional person that could help be dedicated to field maintenance, especially with the Madeiras project and the size of that land over there. And I forgot what the 4th one was. So if Mr. Cabral is on, he can jump in and talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So thank you, Stephen. To Mr. Kazim's point, we have had some lengthy discussions on the demands on the department, and the most substantial or immediate need would be for our facilities. We have a lot of maintenance work associated with that. That is the highest demand, and a position there would certainly lend itself to serve that better. The next 2 assignments would be focusing mainly on stormwater, part of our MS4 mandate from the state on our stormwater permitting. Really requires a lot more than we've been putting into on the whole drainage infrastructure. That's probably the one aspect in our department that we're mostly reactive to, whereas everything else we do is pretty much proactive. And it's just because of the lack of personnel to really handle what needs to be done out there on an annual basis. And then the fourth position, again, as Mr. Kadim had mentioned, really is going to focus around conservation, recreation, additional land, the trails, all the other items that we've undertaken, and the maintenance that goes along with it. As you know, we've had more storms. There's a lot of cleanup work to do after these storms. It's not just towns and roadways anymore and around the buildings. It's also the trails, and it extends a lot more. So realistically, we're looking at the needs of the department, kind of where we are today, to keep up with the level of service that we're providing. That's really what the department is going to need.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
My next comment is, it's more just a comment, Mr. Kadim, and it's more for some of the residents, because I've been fielding some calls with regards to taxes and all of that kind of stuff. And how does your budget, your proposed budget, factor into taxes, et cetera? This is the second year that we've done 2.5. We did 1.75, if I remember correct, back in 2019. But really what we've seen take a big jump, is the debt exclusion. And that's the number that's, going to take a big impact, on people's taxes. In 2019, debt exclusion was in there for 1.4 million. For FY23, you've got 2.9 million. So it's a $1.5 million jump in just a very short window of 4 or 5 years. So that is where we're, everybody's, across the board starting to feel it. Plus you have, assessed values going up given the markets, et cetera. So, the budgets, I think, that you do, Mr. Kadim, I will tell you, you definitely work with all the department heads, and I got to give a lot of credit to the department heads, because you guys work within your means. You work hard to do that. Anybody comes asking, then they're pretty much left begging before they get it. So they really have to justify it, and you work lean. Whether it's your office or other departments, et cetera. So it certainly doesn't go unappreciated and unnoticed. Some of these things that, that we have to maintain certain increases, whether it's for contractual or just the overall needs of the town. It has changed. So again, credit to you, your team, the department heads, and the employees for everybody kind of minding their P's and Q's here and everything that's going on. So we do appreciate that.
I appreciate the comments, and to your point, I think we've all acknowledged that. And I think the conversation started maybe about 2 years ago at the quad board meeting about trying to shift the focus a little bit, especially with the debt exclusion and the various building projects that we had coming on, which is why the board took a very proactive approach trying to establish the building and infrastructure stabilization account, and identifying additional revenues, the marijuana revenues coming in, to really kind of throw it in there to help alleviate some of the costs that the taxpayers were going to have. And part of that, and I think we were all on the same page, being very understanding of the burden that is placed on the taxpayers when we have a 2.5% increase and debt exclusion. It really is, from my standpoint, very significant increases. And so that's why we were trying to shift the focus and get some of our debt within the tax levy. We've already started to do that. And I know it's not a whole lot, but we have at least $1 million from the senior center right off the top of my head that did not go to the debt exclusion that we've carried in within the levy, the tax levy, and we're paying it through the operating budget there. So we'll continue to try to work that and be cognizant and appreciative of an understanding of the fact that the tax rates, we can't see those significant increases and continue to go to the debt exclusion. And it's unfortunate right now especially with the real estate market the way it is, that valuations are going to be increasing as well. So we want to be understanding of that moving forward. So we do it on a daily basis when we're looking at the budgets to make sure that we can kind of streamline and trim some of the costs that we have. So we'll continue to watch that and try to absorb some of the debt within the operating budget as we go year over year.
I appreciate that. As we know, we got plenty of residents out there that are feeling it, and particularly, they're feeling it this year. And from the looks of things, it's going to be a big hit in the pocket next year too. And I had a very informative conversation with Ms. DeFonts, and as she, put it to me perfectly, which was, hey, this is the assessments and the values themselves are lagging. So it's always going to be a year after the fact. And so even if the market goes down, you're still paying for the year before. So it's just how it works.
Right. Yeah,
So-
that's what I was going to say. You're about a year and a half lagging when you start seeing the real estate market. So the market's hot right now. So until the market drops, you won't see that for at least a year and a half after the market starts to I guess tail off, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word.
All right. So just want to make sure that the residents out there that are watching were understanding of what goes into it and what's also impacts. It's not just going up 2.5%, but there are a lot of other impacts to the taxes and how it's affected. So if there are no other questions, I'm not seeing any other hands up. So if there are no other questions, I want to thank all the department heads for hopping on here tonight. Would like to also thank the finance committee for the members that were here. Thank you for also hopping on as well. This would conclude tonight's public hearing for the FY23 budget hearing.